if you're interested in opening an Isle of Man offshore bank account, you're not alone. In fact, thousands of people have already taken advantage of an Isle of Man offshore bank account. In most cases, these accounts are opened remotely with well-capitalized banks in what many consider one of the most stable offshore jurisdictions. In this video, we're going to share insights into how you can open an Isle of Man offshore bank account. This includes the opening challenges, important considerations, who should bank here, and how you can get started today. But before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get alerted every time we post new non-resident banking opportunities. Now, to help you get started with the Isle of Man offshore bank account opening, we have a free non-resident banking starter guide. It's designed to help non-resident and foreigners open bank accounts. So don't forget to download your copy using the link in the description below. When you think of great international banking hubs, you picture a combination of economic stability, political certainty, rule of law, strong banks, and a culture of professionalism and accountability. The Isle of Man, unlike many other island nations with offshore financial centers, ticks all of these boxes. While many other countries that offer similar financial and corporate services are often labeled as tax havens or get added to international watch lists or blacklists, the Isle of Man is often considered cleaner, better regulated, and well respected. Additionally, unlike many of the other offshore banking hubs you might be considering, the Isle of Man is home to several large UK banks. Compare that to the many small shoebox banks that you'll find scattered across the Caribbean, and you'll start to see why the Isle of Man may be a better option for banking. Is an Isle of Man offshore bank account really safe? Well, that comes down to two important factors. First, the Isle of Man itself, and secondly, the bank you choose to open accounts with. The Isle of Man is a safe, politically stable, and well-regulated jurisdiction. In fact, while many offshore jurisdictions are constantly under threat and rotating between watch lists, politically motivated blacklistings, and regulatory scrutiny, the Isle of Man has emerged unscathed and has maintained a relatively clean reputation. And that makes sense since the island and the UK has a lot to lose if things went south. The Isle of Man is home to £45 billion in deposits from individuals, companies, and investment funds from around the world, many with strong UK ties. Next, you might be wondering, are Isle of Man banks safe? Well, the short answer is yes. Isle of Man banks are safe when compared to most offshore jurisdictions. However, it's important to investigate each bank's financials, business model, compliance quirks, ownership structure, and limitations before opening accounts. To do this, follow the instructions in the non-resident banking starter guide available in the description box below. We also discuss how to identify bank risk and red flags more in-depthly in GlobalBanks Insider, but more on that in a little bit. Another risk to consider is, what happens if the bank fails? Well, in the case of the Isle of Man, the Isle of Man's Depositor Compensation Scheme, DCS, covers deposits up to £50,000 per person per bank. So if deposit insurance is important to you and you want to deposit more than £50,000 in an Isle of Man offshore bank account, consider opening with more than one bank. Next, Isle of Man banking secrecy. If you're interested in banking secrecy in the Isle of Man, you're a couple decades too late. Due to the introduction of Common Reporting Standards, CRS, Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, FATCA, and the Automatic Exchange of Information, AEOI, banking secrecy no longer exists as it once did. In other words, you can expect banks here to report your financial holdings to tax authorities in your home country or country of tax residency. To learn more, check out the following articles to get more detailed information. First, we have Common Reporting Standards, non-AEOI countries, CRS country tracker, and banking secrecy is over. So, who should open an Isle of Man offshore bank account? An Isle of Man offshore bank account is attractive for many client groups, including non-residents, expats, and digital nomads. We'll outline a few of these groups for you in detail in a minute. Non-residents and expats living outside of their home country can benefit from a bank account in a stable first world jurisdiction. Depending on your objectives, an Isle of Man offshore bank account might just meet your criteria. In addition to stability, banks here actually cater to the needs of third country expats. This refers to people who live and work outside of their country of citizenship and who need to bank outside their country of residence. If that's you, an Isle of Man offshore bank account could be worth considering. Next, GBP denominated banking. As a Crown dependency, the Isle of Man offers a mid-shore solution for anyone who needs to transact in GBP but doesn't want to or can't open accounts in the UK. If that's you, instead of wasting time trying to open with onshore banks in the UK, you may want to consider the Isle of Man as a less complicated banking option. Next, people who require remote account opening. As mentioned, opening an Isle of Man offshore bank account remotely is 100% possible. Of course, there are some variables that you need to consider, and this isn't available to everyone. But if you have the right information, contacts, and know which banks to approach, this is entirely possible. So, if opening an offshore bank account from the comfort of your couch is a priority, the Isle of Man might be worth considering. Next, let's look at the benefits of an Isle of Man offshore bank account. In past videos and articles, we've discussed the benefits of banking in the Isle of Man for both individuals, businesses, and beyond. So we won't go into the same level of detail here about all the client groups who can benefit from banking here. If you would like to learn more, you can check out the videos available on our channel or at globalbanks.com. To illustrate the advantages, here are some of the top benefits of opening an Isle of Man offshore bank account. Remote account opening. Familiar with non-residents and foreign entities. Low minimum deposit requirements. Low monthly maintenance fees. Low transaction fees. Access to major international currencies. Sophisticated financial sector with experienced staff. English language customer support. Deposit insurance up to £50,000 per person per bank. Clean reputation and on the OECD whitelist, and sophisticated corporate structuring services. Now, the benefits of an Isle of Man offshore bank account stem from the island's well-developed offshore financial center, close ties to the City of London, and laws heavily influenced by English common law. These three influences have turned the Isle of Man into one of the most well-respected offshore hubs in the world today. So it's no surprise that so many individuals and corporations are interested in opening accounts there. Next, challenges of opening an Isle of Man offshore bank account. Now, there are some challenges that most people encounter when trying to open an Isle of Man offshore bank account. One of these is choosing the right bank. Like all banking jurisdictions, banks in the Isle of Man each have their own client preferences and different requirements. In fact, even the big box, brand name banks on the island have surprising requirements and clients acceptance policies. For instance, certain banks only accept clients from a small number of countries. Other banks may require specific ties to certain regions or jurisdictions or entities with certain characteristics. Here's a quick breakdown of a few common challenges applicants face when trying to open an Isle of Man offshore bank account. Finding banks that accept their client profile, having sufficient ties to required jurisdictions, having sufficient ties to the Isle of Man, if it's applicable, high upfront account opening fees if you apply incorrectly, high deposit requirements for high-risk clients, and corporate account opening challenges that we discuss more in depthly in GlobalBanks Insider. Fortunately, with the right account opening strategies, most applicants can open an Isle of Man offshore bank account from the comfort of their home. But to do so, it's critically important to first choose the right bank and banker, the right account opening strategy, and then follow the proven steps to apply. How to open an Isle of Man offshore bank account. We explain exactly how to open an Isle of Man offshore bank account in our premium report, How to Open Accounts in the Isle of Man. We also have a video on how to open a bank account in the Isle of Man that can be accessed by clicking on the link below. This will help deliver the actionable intelligence, tools, and banking strategies that you need to successfully open an Isle of Man bank account remotely. All right, after all that, are you ready to open an Isle of Man offshore bank account? Well, whether you want to know how to open accounts remotely or which banks will accept you, we can help. All you have to do is join our flagship service, GlobalBanks Insider. With GlobalBanks Insider, you'll get instant access to our entire archive of banking intelligence reports, access to the GlobalBanks database, home to more than 250 banks from 50 plus countries, including detailed bank profiles, client preferences, and a whole lot more. Finally, you'll also get real-time analyst support from our team of experts, ready to answer your most pressing banking questions, and to make suggestions on which banks in the Isle of Man and elsewhere will best meet your objectives. To get started, just click the link in the description below to learn more about GlobalBanks Insider. And before signing off, don't forget to hit subscribe so you get alerted every time we share new banking opportunities. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.